Good morning, everyone. As we're waiting for our last few attendees to join us, we begin in just a few minutes. I just would like to welcome you all and just kind of share a couple things with you. Since this is all about interviews, I'm sure the question in everybody's mind is, are we all dressed for the interview? And not that we're necessarily interviewing today, but we've all seen and heard the stories about people who do online interviews and they're wearing their jacket and a tie or their business suit from the waist up, but it's a mystery what's happening elsewhere in the attire. So let me just make it clear. I am wearing white jeans. I'm wearing shoes. I've got my Conn-Selmer shirt on, and I am ready for the mock interview, if we want to call that today. So start thinking about your questions that you may have. This is a two-part presentation, although please don't feel obligated to have to attend anything that you in lieu of something else. There's so many great presentations. Feel free to jump tracks as you like. If you have any questions you want to type into the chat window right now, go ahead. And if you would please use the little red button to flag anything that's actually a question, so we might come back to that a little bit later. If you were not in my last session, I want to introduce someone behind the scenes, Rania El-Kare. She's the one behind the scenes making me look good, and she's going to monitor the chat window and bring anything to my attention we might need. So we'll double up there on the accountability when it comes to the correspondence there. I also have created a Dropbox folder that has links, that has materials for each one of the presentations I'm doing for CSI, as well as a lot of other materials as well that I hope you'll find useful. Many of those materials are native documents that you can edit and customize as you need to for your own purposes, your own students, your own situation. I also want to encourage you as we go through this presentation to keep in mind that when you go online and you're looking for sample resumes and for tips on how to put together a cover letter, that kind of thing, you're going to be greeted usually by the business world. What I'm going to share with you is some strategies that I think are, I won't say unique, but maybe preferred among those of us in education. The expectations are a little bit different, and there's some things I'll share with you as we move along. But again, I want to underscore something Tim said earlier today in the opening session, is that this is not a one and done proposition. Personally, as the coordinator of the collegiate track, I want very much to establish a relationship, or open the door anyway, to all of you, to be a resource to you, and to even to those of you obviously who are not college students but are here just to get some more information. I look forward very much to expanding my network and being a resource to as many people as I possibly can. So again, feel free to check the offers. There's a handout that accompanies this presentation, and I believe the Dropbox folder link was sent in the pre-event email, and you'll find other sample interview questions and other documents that I think you'll find to be somewhat helpful. I'd like to share a link with you right now in the chat window. One of the questions that often comes up is the difference between a resume and a CV, which is a curriculum vitae. And I'll just start by saying that a resume, the primary difference between those two is the length. A CV is sort of a chronological history of everything you've ever done in the profession. That it's almost like your journal of everything you've ever done within reason. A resume is just that. It is a summary of what your experience has been, usually contained to one, perhaps 2 pages. Rarely would you have a resume that would be more than 2 pages long. That's when it sort of becomes a CV. So here's the link I'm going to share with you. I'm not saying I endorse the link. As all I'm saying is I found some good resources here on understanding the difference between a CV and a resume, particularly when it comes to international jobs. And since we do have attendees from around the world for this event, I want to be sure we acknowledge our neighbors in other parts of the world and that they find some relevance here as well. Now, that being said, when it comes to relevance, I want everybody please to understand that anytime we do a presentation like this, there are no absolutes. I'm sharing with you my my experience as someone who's done a lot of hiring and as someone who's also been on the other end applying for jobs as well. And to share with you my conversations I've had with many people who are currently administrators who are doing a lot of hiring, a lot of interviews, and the things that they've given me as well. So without further ado, let's make note here. This is my contact information. You'll find that in my email correspondence. You don't need to feel like you have to scramble to write that down. But if you'd like, there it is. I welcome your call or correspondence. Of course, if you do decide to call me, you might want to send me a text first and introduce yourself, because I get so many calls from anonymous numbers right now. I rarely pick up unless I know who's on the other line. So just let me know who you are, and I'll be happy to respond. So something that I mentioned in my first presentation this morning is that everything we do in this profession, and anything really in life, it's really about relationships. And every interview you have, whether you get the job or not, you are expanding your network. You are working at building relationships with administrators, with colleagues you haven't met yet, with people who may someday be your boss. You never know. I know any number of individuals who initially interviewed someplace, did not get the job, and then years later ended up being colleagues with one of those people that they interviewed with previously. So this is all about building relationships. So that being said, the title of this presentation is part one, is laying the groundwork. So let's start off by asking, what is the objective of the interview? And that's really a question I've gotten a poll here. So I just launched this poll. What is the single most desirable outcome of the job interview? Is it to get to know your prospective employer to see if it's a good fit? For your prospective employer to get to know you? Is it to get the job? Is it to get the job offer? Which of those four do you think it is? And the poll is live, so feel free to respond to one of those four questions, one of those four responses. What is the purpose of the interview? And I always love watching these results populate. Okay, looks like so far, most of us, it's for the prospective employer to get to know you. We have a surge now to get to know your prospective employer to see if it's a good fit. These are great answers. Great. I see this. Looks like to get the job is the least popular response right now. Interesting. That is very unusual. Most of the time when I pose this question and ask what's the objective of the interview, it's to get the job. So I'm very intrigued that is by far the lowest percentage so far. Well, if you said it's to get to know your prospective employer to see if it's a good fit, certainly that's important. That's part of it. Is it for your prospective employer to get to know you? Sure. If it's to get the job, let's hope that it's the job you want. But really, the main objective of the interview is to get the job offer. Because once you've got the job offer, now the ball's in your court, and you're in a position to ask some questions that you might not ask otherwise. And that's why I've entitled this or subtitled this presentation, Laying the Groundwork. So this is all what happens prior to the interview to set yourself up for those things that happen once that interview's taken place. And of course, first thing you've got to do is you got to make contact. And the three most obvious ways of making contact are through a letter of interest or introduction. And make sure you understand that a letter of interest or a cover letter, a letter of introduction, that's not the same thing as a letter of intent. A letter of intent is something that a prospective employer sends you with the job offer, or it's something that you put in writing that says you accept the job offer. That's a letter of intent. So please, let's make that distinction. A cover letter or letter of interest or introduction is simply presenting yourself, introducing yourself to someone that you hope to interview with or become acquainted with. Of course, your resume is going to be the thing that speaks most to your qualifications and is going to get you into that next level, which is hopefully the pile of people they're going to contact. And of course, there are your references. And your reference list may change depending on the job you're interviewing for. For instance, I always advise my young teachers, my college students, that when they construct their reference list, to put people on the reference list that might be familiar names to the people where they're interviewing. Because I know that when I'm looking at a resume, I certainly look for qualifications, but I go right to that reference list. Who does this person know that I know? Who does this person know that I trust? Because those connections are critical. And I'm going to share a little story with you. This is years ago. I was teaching at Berkner High School in Richardson, Texas. It's the place I retired from in 2014. And the Baylor University Wind Ensemble came to our school to do a concert. And following the concert, this eager young clarinet player, who at that time was a junior, walked up to me and said, "Hey, Mr. Troika, you may not remember me, but my name is Andrew Week. I went to high school in Nebraska. I'm majoring in music here at Baylor, of course. And you and I met at the Tournament of Roses parade for Bands of America a few years ago." And I kind of pretended to remember him, but the fact is, I didn't. But the more he explained, the more I recalled, I do remember this kid. So I said, "So what brings you down to Texas from Nebraska?" I figured he probably wanted to study with that particular clarinet professor or something like that. He said, "No, he wants to come down and he wants to be a band director, and he would love to teach in Texas if the opportunity presents itself." So I said, "Well, tell me, Andrew, are you out observing right now? Are you out teaching anywhere?" "No." "Are you teching for a marching band?" "No." "Are you teaching private lessons?" "No." Okay, so now Andrew's got a 4.0. He's a great musician. He plays piano beautifully, clarinet beautifully, but he hasn't done anything right now to establish himself in the environment where he wants to teach. And so at that point, I opened the door to Andrew to do some teaching with me in the summer and some other opportunities so that people could get to know him, so that when the time came for him to apply for jobs, he had made some connections. And it was just so, we were all very fortunate that Andrew ended up doing his student teaching with us that following year. So he got to be around us. We got to learn about him. And I was very happy to have given him his first job. And he's still teaching there in the Berkner cluster after 11 years now, I guess it is or so. But it's about connections. It's about who we know and working to expand that. And guys, let me tell you, you're at CSI Connect. You've got some of the absolute best, most influential people on the planet here that are ready to be advocates for you. Don't hesitate to reach out to them, to email them, to thank them for the wonderful presentation that you heard Richard Saucedo do, for the wonderful keynote Larry Livingston did, for the inspiring words you got from Matthew Arau about growth mindset. These are all, send a quick note of thanks. Then you start a relationship. So reach out, make contact. You'll be very pleased at how accommodating everyone is. Now, here's an example of a really good cover letter. So forgive me for reading to you, but since we're not in the same room at the same time, my reading to you helps me ensure that I stay on track and that we're all getting the same information. Dear Dr. Morgan, please consider this letter of interest for the position of Assistant Band Director at Hometown High School. I have recently earned degrees in music education and horn performance from In-State University, and I believe the sum of my experiences thus far have equipped me to serve the high caliber of programs in the Hometown ISD. Now, I'd like you to consider that first paragraph for a moment. What's in it? Going on. At IU, I studied wind pedagogy with Ida No and Dr. Aaron Finger, and I performed with the IU Wind Ensemble, Horn Octet, and Symphony Orchestra. I student taught at Wunderkind High School under the mentorship of Carson Milot and Dr. Nada Klue. I worked with the Pride of Wunderkind Marching Band, rehearsed and conducted bands at several levels on 2 concerts, and organized and taught section rehearsals, and worked with beginner and middle school band classes. These experiences taught me how to teach instrumental techniques effectively in large and small group settings, to manage rehearsal time, and tailor my instructional strategies to students at all levels of musical experience. Now, let's consider the content of this particular paragraph. Notice he uses the abbreviation IU Wind Ensemble, but that's only after he identified it as In-State University in the previous paragraph. Be careful about assuming that your acronyms are universal. There is more than one OSU out there. Next paragraph. Furthermore, I'm well versed in the marching band arena. For 2 summers, I played mellophone with Carolina Crown Drum and Bugle Corps, and I served as a 2-year drum major of the In-State University Marching Band. These experiences provided me with a pedagogical understanding of specific concepts, including marching technique and ensemble timing, as well as confidence in my ability to teach and implement these concepts successfully. In all, I believe the breadth of my performance and educational experiences, my work ethic, and my commitment to continuous learning and improvement make me an ideal candidate to serve the Hometown Band program. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to your reply. Sincerely, Hayden Life. Now, if that letter goes out as is, it's just fine. But there's some ways we can make it better structurally. So let's take a look at it now. notice that we've broken things up. We've created some white space, and that's easier on the eyes. Now, when you create paragraphs, you either align everything to the left and put space in between, extra space, or you indent without the extra space. You don't indent and create white space. That's like wearing a belt and suspenders. It's like a little bit redundant. So this way, we've got each paragraph clearly identified. And let's take a little closer look now at the way the paragraph is constructed. So we start off with a formal personal salutation. Dear Dr. Morgaine, not Dr. Morgaine, not Fred. You use the formal salutation and say, Dear Dr. Morgaine, or something that if you receive an email from an administrator and it just says, Mr. Johnson, it's like, uh-oh, am I in trouble? So the word dear or hello, Dr. Morgaine, something like that, so that you come off as more personal. That's the intent there. The first paragraph is a brief introduction. And this is where you give your overall qualifications, what position you're looking for, where you got your degree, and what your instrument is. Those things that give me just a snapshot right now of who you are and what you do. The next paragraph is the main body, and this is where you put your essential information. And you'll notice this particular person listed who he studied with, the ensembles he worked with, the experiences, the age level, everything that was a part of the student teaching experience is in here, the main responsibilities. The next paragraph gives the additional qualifications or unique skills. In this case, this particular individual had drum corps experience. So use this as an additional qualification. Now, for those of you seeking band director jobs, I want you to understand that you don't necessarily have to have drum corps experience to be an attractive candidate. There are all kinds of ways to take whatever your experiences are and to spin them in such a way that can make you an attractive candidate. I personally was the consummate late bloomer. Nothing ever happened for me in a timely manner, it seemed. I didn't go to college right after high school because I had a gap year because I had to work to earn money. It took me 7 years, I can't believe I'm admitting this, to get my undergraduate degree because of setbacks of one kind or another. There were never any failed classes, but there was failure of finance. And there were times when I took only 12 hours because I could afford to pay that, and that helped me keep my scholarship. Marching drum corps set me back a semester. So I had all these things that initially looked like problems. So to the young teachers I work with, and there are some first-year teachers I work with that are in their 30s, they sometimes are a little apprehensive about answering the questions about, well, why did it take so long for you to get your degree? Or why are you just now getting your first job when most first-year teachers are in their early to mid-20s? Well, my response to that is, look at your age as a positive. You don't bring, no offense to the early 20-somethings in the room here, but when you're 26, 27, 30, you're in a different place in your life in terms of your maturity and your development than someone who's 22 or 23. You've seen more of the world. You've gained a maturity that's only available for having gone that distance. So whatever looks like it might be a shortcoming, we want to work to spin it into something positive. You can almost always do that. Next paragraph is a summary. In all, I believe the breadth of my performance and educational experiences, my work ethic, and my commitment to continuous learning and improvement make me an ideal candidate. Thank you for your time and consideration. Now, this is the appreciation, express gratitude, and a charge. Now, do not say, please call me at your earliest opportunity so we can discuss my qualifications further. Wrong. You don't tell somebody, you don't give someone a directive. You are here asking to be considered, and you want to open the door politely, but with a sense of confidence. I look forward to your reply. Does not give them a mandate, but it assumes that there will be further contact. And then to help promote that, you have your closure, sincerely, and you put your cell phone number right there. I don't care if your cell phone number is plastered all over your resume, if it's tattooed on your forehead on whatever social media platform you subscribe to. You put your email, your cell phone number right there so that they can make an impulse call. I've read your cover letter. Wow, this sounds like it's somebody I might want to this might be somebody good. And so make it easy on them. Don't make them go look for your contact information. Now, take a good look at this letter and the way it's formatted, because there's a little bit more to it here that may go unnoticed that will encourage the reader to read it fully. And here's what it is. Notice that the first paragraph is only 4 lines long. The next one is 8, then 5, then 3, then 1. So we have our brief introduction and then all of our main information in the largest paragraph in the first half of the letter. If your paragraphs get progressively longer, people are less likely to get to the bottom. Unless specifically asked to in the job posting, I don't think you want to go into a lot of philosophy here, because most people are going to have a very similar philosophy of music education, and that's probably not going to distinguish you among other candidates. So use your cover letter to identify those things that are unique to you, so that you are able to, people can zero in on your unique offerings. So again, if you're sending this a cover letter in an email, the way the sentences wrap and the paragraphs format will be different. The main point I'm trying to make here is that you want to start with something that is brief but catchy, something that's going to grab me. Then your qualifications, and then everything after that, I recommend you make smaller and smaller in terms of your paragraphs, because that encourages the reader to get to the bottom. If you were to send the cover letter as an attachment, please format it correctly, put the date, your contact information, and even though you've got your cell number up here, you have your cell number down below too. Again, make it as easy as possible for anyone to contact you impulsively. Also, I suggest you have at least a 0.75 inch, 3/4 inch margin on the left, because if you're applying for a position that's a very big desirable one, there may be lots of applicants, and they may print hard copies of everything and then 3-hole punch them to put them in a binder. And you don't want the 3 holes to punch through any of the text that you have provided. Now, I'd like to move forward now and take a look at an actual resume. This is a resume that I thought was really quite well done. Kyle Norris just happens to be a band director in Leander, Texas. Now, he went to high school at Union High School in Tulsa and got his undergraduate degree from Oklahoma State University. I became acquainted with him while he was a student at Oklahoma State, where I'm actually on faculty as well. He put together a very nice resume here. He has his education, his professional certification, his teaching and related experience, awards, performance and leadership experience, and then professional associations. And that looks quite good. But I'm not drawn to the things that are his unique qualifications. All of his teaching and related experience appear to me to be equally weighted and equally important. But that doesn't really help me zero in on Kyle's strengths. Now, before I move on to show you the revised version, notice that all of the entries here are in reverse chronological order. So give your most current things first. When things span a range of years or months, whatever date is the final date is what you use to arrange them in reverse chronological order. So let's look at how we revised this. Notice now on the right that we have some bullets here. So instead of professional or teaching and related experience, we're calling it professional experience now. And so we can see, oh, he was an assistant band director. He was a staff member. He taught a brass section. He's been a solo and ensemble judge. He's been a region band audition judge. He's been a student teacher at a certain place. Here are his awards. And then related experience is its own separate category instead of being jumbled up with the teaching experience. So this was a way to help draw more attention to the specific areas that Kyle is particularly good at. Now, I've got another poll I want to start with you. So question now is, should you include a photo of yourself embedded in your resume? What do you think? Yes or no? Should you include a picture of yourself? And preliminary results, 87% said no so far, 88%, 18% now say yes. All right. So looks like about 90% of you say no, about 10% or approximately say yes. Well, I'm not going to tell you yes or no, right or wrong, but what I will tell you is I would not encourage you to include your photo, even if you are drop dead gorgeous, maybe especially if you're drop dead gorgeous. And I know this may sound a little bit I don't know, maybe like I'm coming out of left field, but people tend to make decisions impulsively. And a picture, you never know how someone is going to be affected by your photo. I think it's safer not to. They're going to go on social media and look for you anyway, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But I'm not going to say it's a mistake. I'm going to say that people tend to make snap decisions about that. So I would do that cautiously. And again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not telling you don't do that. I've gotten resumes that have had pictures on them, and that's fine. But I have actually had experience where individuals, and this is going to sound terrible, but I'm just going to tell you straight up. I saw someone one time say, no, he's too much of a pretty boy. We need to get somebody who doesn't. It's like, what? Okay, I don't get that. But I'm just telling you, I heard that one time and it offended me. Maybe it's because I wasn't that pretty boy. I don't know. But I just think it's a little bit safer to go without. So here's Kyle's reference list. Horn professor, where he did his student teaching, trumpet professor, and then he included me at the bottom. And I'm going to explain more about who should be on your reference list in just a moment. So let's talk about making eye contact. Your online identity is important because everybody is going to go to Google and search your name. It's just going to happen. So even if whether you have a Facebook account or not, doesn't matter. People are going to go to Facebook. They're going to go to TikTok. They're going to go to Snapchat, Instagram, all kinds of places. So just be aware of that. It's going to happen. So I want to share with you a post I did a few years ago. This was actually 4 years ago now. Dear young teacher seeking your first job, would you staple your Facebook profile to your resume? If the answer is no, you might consider changing it. By the way, everything you post on Facebook is stapled to your resume. Sincerely, prospective employer. P.S. Unfair? Maybe. Reality? Absolutely. Now, if you look here at the bottom, you can see I had 946 likes. But what you don't know is there were dozens and dozens of comments. Most of them were very supportive, but I got flamed by a bunch of people talking to me about how it's your right to express yourself and to be who you are. I don't argue that. I never said you don't have the right to express yourself or be who you are. I never said that. But what I am saying is nobody has to explain why they passed you over for consideration. They don't have to do that. And public schools are a conservative institution, and people that are doing the hiring are not going to be attracted to someone who invites controversy or that might seem like they are taking a risk. And again, that's just sort of the way the world works. So we have to be, the education world, I should say. So we have to look at ways of presenting the most favorable impression of ourselves, taking all of our positives and spinning them even greater, and anything that might be a shortcoming, looking for ways to overcome those. And I'm really good at helping people with those things. So I invite you to reach out to me personally if I can help you with any of that. This is an actual tweet. Dropped another prospect this AM due to his social media presence. Actually glad I got to see the real person before we offered him. This next one's from Duke. Our jobs depend on the young men that we recruit. Your social media pages say a lot about your character, discipline, and common sense. I'm on the faculty at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and this is an actual tweet from SMU. Came across an awful Twitter account today. Shame, the kid was really a good player. On to the next one. Get a clue. That's the world. Now, I suggest that you consider creating a Facebook profile if you don't have one, and using it to promote your suitability as a teacher. Put up photos of you working with students. Make it a very positive statement about your values as a teacher. You're involved with the community. I would avoid things where you are in an atmosphere that might call things into question. So I'll leave it at that. But I think it's great to use social media as an opportunity to promote ourselves. And if you, I don't know if any of you ever have any trouble sleeping at night. I know that many college students stress out over a lot of things. I know I did. If ever you're having trouble sleeping, I invite you to go to my Facebook. It'll put you straight to sleep. Totally boring, totally innocuous. But when somebody clicks on there, they get a feel for who I am as a teacher and a band director. So that's what I use my Facebook account for. So now, before the interview, be certain that the people on your reference list are aware of it. And you want people on your list that can speak to you from direct observation. So I'll give you a little example here. A few years ago, this person is now in his second year of teaching. I'm on the staff with the Blue Devils. I'm the director of education for System Blue, Blue Devils Drum and Bugle Corps. I don't work directly with the Corps. I help create educational events for teachers and primarily high school and middle school students. And there was a member of the Blue Devils trumpet section who was from Texas. He was seeking a job. He wanted to list me as a reference. I was really happy and excited to be a reference for him, but I told him, I can only speak to your character because I've never seen you teach. And I can't make assumptions about your teaching simply because I think you're a great guy. So he was a little bit crestfallen after that. And so what I did is I managed to go down and actually watch him do some teaching. And I saw him teach for several hours, as a matter of fact. And that gave me a good feel of what he could do. And then I felt comfortable accepting his invitation to be on his reference list, because now I could say what I actually did see. So everybody in your reference list should know it, and be sure that they're all going to speak positively about you. Do your homework about the job you're looking for. What's the mascot? What are the demographics like? Go to the school's website and look things over so that you have a feel for the community. Look at the results from contests. Maybe you could start the interview off with hey, congratulations on a concert season. Looks like you guys had really strong performances at orchestra contests this year. Good for you. Or maybe you don't want to sound quite so patronizing, but you know what I'm saying. If you can speak to some familiarity with them, then it's sort of like you're already part of the family rather than a stranger there trying to get to know them. Anticipate questions. They're going to ask you, tell us about yourself. Don't be caught off guard by that. They're going to want you to say something about yourself. So be prepared for that. Practice eliminating distractors and filler words from your formal speech. Okay, like, so, you know. Work to eliminate those phrases because they tend to make you seem amateurish or like you're searching for answers. Silence can be far more powerful. So when you're asked a question, instead of filling up that silence with, well, just be silent for a moment and then speak. It'll make you appear much more thoughtful and poised. I would suggest that you think about where you want to be 5 years from now. And we'll talk about that when we get to the interview itself in the next session. But anticipate questions such as, who were your mentors? Who inspired you to become a teacher? When did you know you wanted to become a teacher? What did you feel were the things in your student teaching that you prepared you well for the next step? What are the things you wish your student teaching experience had provided for you that you didn't get? Those are all things that you can expect to be asked on most every interview. And you want to compile your own list of questions. And there are two categories of questions you'll compile. One, before the job offer, and two, after. Because there are certain questions you don't want to talk about until after you get the job offer, namely salary. That's the big one, really. Because none of us got into this profession to get rich, although you can certainly make a great living as a teacher. You really can. And this whole myth about teachers being consigned to a life of poverty, that's a myth. And I'm just going to go off on a slight tangent here. The moment you get your first real job where you're making a regular income that you're making on your own, two things. One, live like a starving college student for at least another year, because the more money you make, the more money you're going to spend. And if you can live a conservative, meager, prudish existence for that first year, you're going to learn where your money really goes. That's number one. Number two, start putting money away into a retirement account immediately, a separate one from the one that's provided by your state or school district. And you want to get a financial planner to help you with that, because there's no reason after teaching for 30 years that you can't retire wealthy. Now, that's a completely different subject, but I encourage you to speak to a financial planner and start making those kinds of plans early on, because the sooner you start, the more the pot grows. You want to conduct mock interviews. Find an administrator, a band director, an orchestra teacher, choir director, anyone who's hired before, and have them conduct mock interviews with you. That's how you learn how to do this. Now, let me tell you what to expect when we get into part 2. We're going to go into the interview itself, and that means we'll discuss your initial impression. We'll go a little bit deeper into some sample questions. We'll talk about how you approach closing down the interview and the kinds of things that happen near the very end of the interview. And then we'll discuss the follow-up, what you do after the interview that will help enhance your suitability and the likelihood of getting a phone call. And then we'll talk about some caveats, some things that maybe you're going to want to avoid. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to open the chat window. It looks like we've got a few questions waiting right now. So let me go to Shannon. She says, do you recommend the cover letter in email format or typed and sent via mail? Or does it matter either way? I would think that snail mail would be the least desirable now. I think the most efficient way of communicating is going to be via email. I think it's perfectly fine to put your cover letter in the body of the email, but also certainly be acceptable to put a PDF attachment. Now, whenever you send anything, your resume, cover letter, references, anything, please don't send native documents. Send them always as PDFs, because you never know how the formatting is going to change. And the way you format your letter says something about your attention to detail. Everything does. If you don't subscribe to Grammarly, check it out. Check your sentence structure. Check your writing. Please punctuate, please capitalize, understand the differences among there, and there, your and your. It's important. And when you have those kinds of errors in a letter, a cover letter, it says something about your attention to detail, and often you'll get put in the no pile, even if you got these wonderful qualifications, simply because you did it in a hurried manner. Now, to continue with Shannon's question, I would suggest that if you do send it as an attachment, that you not just make it a copy and paste of your email. So in the email, you might say, for your convenience, I've attached a PDF of this cover letter, and leave it at that. So that would be a courtesy. Eric says, on your resume, would you recommend putting a link to your professional website? Absolutely. And in that professional website, you could have a portfolio of things, other qualifications, samples of your work, if you've done any arrangements, maybe videos of you teaching. That would be a wonderful thing to do. Sure, take full advantage of that technology. DeAndre says, when the statement, tell us about yourself, is made, what can you say is a great way to do that without seeming too cocky? I tend to have a hard time explaining because I let my work speak for itself. Well, letting your work speak for yourself, I think, is a great thing. So what you might do, DeAndre, is when somebody says, tell us about yourself, well, you might want to pull out a notebook, a binder that has some things in it that are samples of your work that say, well, here's I ran this contest, or I judged this event. Here are the letters that I sent out to students, my beginners, while I was student teaching. These are all things that they can speak about your professional qualifications. If you wanted to, and really it's okay to say things like some of your non-musical interests. For instance, I love skiing, I love camping and canoeing. So I will include things like that. So when it's tell us about yourself, it's not really so much about you listing off your awards and accolades as it is just who are you as a person. And a binder full of your awards and accomplishments can speak for itself. And then, of course, you could supplement that with your interests, your personal interests. Question is, do you have any good resources for sample interview questions to prepare with? Let me think. Yes, I've got a Dropbox folder full of sample questions. And a link to that, I think, went out in the pre-event email. But I'll make sure that you all have access to that. And you can certainly look those over. And I even included some sample reference forms that I would get when, say, you applied for a job and listed me as a reference. This is what the school district would send me, so you kind of know what they're looking for. Ethan asks, is there a question, in your opinion, that's the most difficult to answer in an interview? Or does it differ for everyone? Well, I'm gonna come clean with you, okay? So if you're gonna ask me the question, I guess I'm forced to be honest. When someone asks me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's always been a tough question for me, because I honestly didn't know. But I know what they're looking for. So sometimes I give them the answer they're looking for. Not if it's a lie, but I give them the answer that fits within what they're looking for and within the framework of what I'm ready to deliver. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, hopefully right here in my current position. Now, of course, if an opportunity to advance presents itself and I'm qualified, I'd love to be considered for that. But this is where I see myself for the foreseeable future. Do you have aspirations of being a head director someday, or do you want to be a career assistant? Actually, I'd love to be a head director at some point, but that's a little bit off my radar screen right now because I have so much to learn. So is there a single question that is the most difficult? No. But I'm going to give you another question now that is often answered wrong. Does poverty affect learning? I should have made this a poll question, but I didn't. Does poverty affect learning? Now, if you're thinking, I'm going to teach every kid, I don't care if they're rich or poor, I don't care if they're smart, I don't care what it is, I teach every kid. That is a very noble response and a good one. But that's the wrong answer, because poverty does affect learning. Because if you are hungry, you're not prioritizing in favor of homework and practicing. If you go home to an abusive environment, you're not thinking about, I have to get my audition ready. Poverty affects learning in a profound way. And we have to understand how to adapt what we do for the kids that we work with. One of my 2 junior highs was it's between 80 and 85% economically disadvantaged. On Friday afternoons, these kids didn't want to go home. They would still be at school till 6 o'clock at night if we didn't kind of chase them out the door. Because some of these kids find the school to be a much friendlier and safe environment than they found their homes to be. So we ended up creating a jazz band at the junior high that meets on Friday afternoons. And of course, we have all instruments represented there. It's not strictly the jazz instrumentation, but it just took off. And these kids now have another way to express themselves. They are learning to read way better than they would from their grade 2 or 3 band pieces. They're reading jazz rhythms, and now we have opportunities to partner with a high school jazz band. So there's all kinds of really cool things that happen there. But it came out of the fact we were responding to a need to meet these kids where they were. And so sometimes these things that we do to accommodate those shortcomings and those difficulties can turn into wonderful opportunities. So poverty does affect learning, and I would encourage you to get familiar with the school district and what their demographics are, and then do a little research about learning and poverty and how we adapt things. Vlad says, when interviewing for a music education job, are there any red flags that show up in the questions that the interview is asking you? There may be. For instance, are you certified do you have a Class C driver's license? And a Class C driver's license basically means, can you drive a bus? Or if they ask you, have you ever worked with students who are at risk or in trouble? Have you ever, in your student teaching, did you ever supervise in-school suspension? Now, those are not necessarily bad things, but if you're someone who is uncomfortable driving a bus and that's part of the job description, that might be a deal breaker for you, even if they do offer you the job. But red flags tend to show up when they're sort of peripheral things that not appear in the job description. So I think that's kind of on an individual basis, to be honest, Vlad. If something makes you uncomfortable, certainly at some point it's okay to ask for more details about that. For instance, if someone said to me, have you ever had any experience supervising in-school suspension? I might ask, oh, actually I haven't. Is that part of the expectation? Is that part of the job? And then let them tell me. And I'm not going to make that a deal breaker at that moment. I'm going to listen, because all of us have to deal with that at some point, probably. So that's sort of I was going to say the short answer, but I think I've talked too long for that to be the short answer. Deanna, how do you personally narrow your decision between job offers when they are all great options for you, as well as the students? Wow, if you are lucky enough to have multiple job offers, more power to you. I think that's when you go back to the list you made before the interview, your list of questions you're going to ask and what feels like the best fit for you. You know, sometimes they say you have to stop rowing and see where the current takes you. And maybe that's what you do. Just go back to before the interview and ask, what were you looking for, and which seems to satisfy that the best. Katie says, in an interview, should you suck it up and answer each question no matter how difficult, or should you speak up and mention that the questions may be out of your knowledge or make you uncomfortable? I think it's perfectly okay to say, I don't have any experience with that. For instance, if they said, you know, I if you have very little experience teaching double reads and you're told, well, we're looking for somebody that can teach a double read class, my response would be, well, looks like I'm taking oboe and bassoon lessons this summer. I would work to fill in those gaps. I once heard of someone who was asked to give them the password to their Facebook account so they could go look. No. In that situation, my response to the person was, first of all, that's a red flag for me. Anybody ask me for a password, that's a red flag. But my response to that was, I would say, I'm uncomfortable giving my passwords out to anyone. However, if you'd like, I'll be happy to log on to Facebook right here and you can take a look. Now, again, that's crossing the line for me. But if something makes you uncomfortable, I would say be as diplomatic as you can, because remember, we're working to build relationships and you never know how something is going to be perceived. What it may seem like to you might not be the way intended. So kind of give the benefit of the doubt there. One more question. Joseph says, should the questions be written out to remember them, or should we just remember them? It's perfectly okay to write your questions out. Absolutely. But I would, again, recommend that you not do this on a computer. Have a good old-fashioned legal pad where you take notes in the interview or you have your questions, because there's something more traditional, more humble, more warm. Nobody presumes that you might be texting if you're using a legal pad. So guys, thank you so much. I want to just real fast here. These are some people that we absolutely should acknowledge for what I've learned from them in this to offer you this presentation. Looking forward to seeing you all in the next one. And whatever track you're in, remember, you cannot go wrong. You can click randomly on any link on these 2 days, and it's going to be a great learning experience. Reach out to me if I can help you with anything. Love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone.